Mass hysteria and the nuclear conspiracy. So there's been a lot of comments and activity on my recent presentation on nuclear power, and thank you to everyone who's contributed. It's a hot topic, so I thought it'd be wise to follow up with an article adding some broader context and diving deeper into the history of the mystery. So if you haven't yet, I would highly recommend watching the presentation. I'm not going to talk about the bomb in this article. I'm just going to talk about the power stations, which is a different tech actually. But there's enough discussion of the bomb narrative in the presentation. Primarily, I set about trying to explain the workings of nuclear power in simple elemental terms, without invoking the unfalsifiable theoretical claim of splitting the uranium atom with neutrons. In the process of this investigation, I stumbled into deeper and deeper layers of the nuclear conspiracy. Note, when you finish writing about something, you start learning a lot more about that thing. I myself am neither pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear. I only got into it as a PhD subject because I was fascinated by quantum mechanics, and nuclear physics is an application of that same mathematical framework. But it's important to understand that academic nuclear physics has nothing to do with power stations or bombs. It is essentially just mathematical modeling of the interactions between light and matter. Nevertheless, there has been a strong and persistent anti-nuclear movement since the late 1940s. The first power stations came online in the early 50s, and the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, was formed in the UK in 1958. The general rationale of anti-nuclear is that the power stations are producing weapons-grade fuel and are essentially ticking time bombs. Eventually, something will go wrong, and the consequences will be a disaster comparable to a nuclear bomb going off in your local area. Therefore, given the dangers involved, there can be no positive use for nuclear. All nuclear is bad. There should be no nuclear anything, period. This is the anti-nuclear position, and it's a hard line. Such strong views are understandable, especially given what we're told by scientists about its potential danger, toxicity, and destructive power. We can easily sympathize with the movement because nuclear doesn't really present itself as something you'd want in your neighborhood anyway. It's not a very appealing line of work. What with all the radioactive neutron bombardment, toxic waste, and the risk you might accidentally drop a spanner and cause a meltdown that leads to the obliteration of an entire county. Thankfully, you don't have to have a PhD in nuclear physics to know just how terrible and unsafe nuclear power is. You need look no further than the introduction to The Simpsons, which has been running for over 36 years and is one of the most watched shows in the world. In it, we are shown everything we need to know about nuclear. We see Homer working away at the Springfield nuclear power plant, overtly portrayed as toxic with green glowing waste, leaking pipes and hazardous materials everywhere. A precarious and dangerous environment, poorly maintained, dilapidated and unsafe, with Homer narrowly avoiding various disasters. The show constantly portrays nuclear as inherently dangerous through various loaded images, such as luminous radioactive rats in the plant's bowels, leaking pipes and drums of radioactive waste, plutonium used as paperweights, cracked cooling towers held together with chewing gum, dangerously high Geiger counter readings, emergency exits that are simply painted on the walls, workers falling asleep at the control rods, and of course, Blinky, the three-eyed fish, a mutant creature from the nearby lake. And no nuclear power plant would be complete without an incompetent management team. Mr. Burns, like Sulfur Burns, the evil billionaire who prioritizes profit over people at every opportunity, and Mr. Smithers, the unqualified safety inspector with a homoerotic infatuation for his boss. That story, or spell, has been cast all over the US and the world, multiple times a day, 7 days a week, for the last 36 years. So all studious television watchers should be quite well informed and aligned in their perception of nuclear power by now. And when you take all that imagery and you mix it up with a dash of World War II propaganda, some videos of large explosions in the desert, and throw in a few highly publicized accidents to generate some hysteria, there can be no excuse for anyone being unaware that nuclear equals bad. Well, you can imagine my surprise when I discovered that these power stations may not be nuclear at all, but rather a kind of alchemical furnace, not nearly as dangerous and toxic as we've been led to believe, and potentially capable of powering societies with cheap, clean electrical energy for a very long time. I was also surprised to learn that the anti-nuclear movement wasn't a grassroots organization of peace-loving hippies who just wanted to defend and protect the environment. No, it turns out it was a top-down agenda, largely funded by the fossil fuel companies, oil and gas, who considered nuclear to be a direct threat to their business, and consider the peace-loving hippies to be useful idiots. Furthermore, nuclear power stations have specifically been targeted for permanent cancellation by our malevolent overlords. In the 1993 book Conspirators' Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman, he spells out the one world government agenda in the form of the 21 goals of the Illuminati. Now, I won't go through all of them as it makes for very sobering reading, but if you want to understand why everything in the West is rapidly going to hell, then you'll find some semblance of an explanation in that list. It includes such laudable ambitions as the destruction of sovereign nations and national identity, the destruction of the Christian religion, mass unemployment and the demoralization of workers, an end to all industrialization and scientific progress, except for computer tech, constant wars, disease, and starvation to reduce the population, to stop people from deciding their own destinies by creating one crisis after another. The normalization of drug abuse, legitimization of pornography as an art form, the total collapse of the world's economies, and the obliteration of the education system. Now, if your eyes are open, then you will have noticed that this plan is already well underway and actually at quite an advanced stage of development and showing no signs of slowing down. But the part that is most relevant to our discussion of nuclear is the end to all industrialization and scientific progress. This is considered a crucial step towards the post-industrial zero-growth society, which involves the elimination of nuclear power for peaceful purposes. So this means that the oligarch class have decided that nuclear is allowed to be used for warfare, destruction, and fear-mongering, but not allowed to be used for peaceful civilization building. I hope that makes sense. The first order of business for anti-nuclear is to stop the creation of any new power plants, and the second is to gradually snuff out the existing ones until they're all gone. Remember, this is not to keep us safe from radiation poisoning, but to keep us safe from energy abundance. We muggles are too savage and unevolved. We would be a danger to ourselves and each other if we had unrestricted access to power. It must be made scarce and expensive, but achieving this is no mean feat. One does not simply ask sovereign nations to shut down large swaths of their energy infrastructure and hold back their development. There would need to be some reason for it, some kind of threat to the climate perhaps, or some perceived danger from keeping them operational. Well, in 1979 there was a series of divinely timed events that helped the cause tremendously. First was the release of the movie The China Syndrome, a story about a near-catastrophic meltdown incident at the fictional Ventana nuclear power plant in California. The term China Syndrome describes a hypothetical nuclear disaster scenario, get this, where reactor components melt through their containment structures and into the underlying Earth, theoretically continuing all the way to China, resulting in a giant hole burned through the center of the globe and vast parts of the Earth destroyed. So the sci-fi writers really earned their bread in those days. Then, just 12 days after the movie hit theaters, there was the incident at the 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, an alleged meltdown that resulted in precisely 0 fatalities, but led to 140,000 people being evacuated, a $1 billion cleanup operation, and a radical overhaul of the nuclear industry. Imagine coming out of the cinema after watching The China Syndrome, then seeing the news headline that a meltdown just occurred for real. Public perception of nuclear was dialed all the way up to hysteria, and this was used to justify halting all new nuclear power plant development in the United States for the next 30 years. So a big win for anti-nuclear. Chernobyl in 1986 was another very well publicized accident. It turned out to be a godsend for the anti-nuclear movement. It caused the Soviets to halt their nuclear expansion program while they implemented new safety inspections and upgrades. Italy accelerated the demise of its nuclear program, eventually shutting down the last reactor in 1990, and Germany vowed to begin phasing out theirs over the long term. Then, with Fukushima in 2011, another extremely well publicized accident, we saw a similar chain reaction of events. Japan decided to shut down all 54 of its reactors for safety and maintenance checks, and this caused Germany to accelerate its lengthy decommissioning process, though they didn't shut down the last reactor until 2023. It's clearly a long-term effort with limited success. Germany and Italy might have been quick to bend to the agenda, but many other countries are pressing full steam ahead with power stations. China, India, Russia, America, France, South Korea, and even the UK and Japan, all showing no signs of giving them up yet. As I said at the beginning, I'm neither for it nor against it. I'm not invested in it at all. I have no influence over the industry, but I'm no longer convinced that nuclear power is a ticking time bomb of toxic neutrons that leads to abominable mutations and 1,000 years of radioactive fallout. It's time to admit that we got duped about nuclear. The danger has been exaggerated for political and militaristic purposes, and the tech is much more rudimentary than nuclear physics would have us believe. I think it's better to call the power plants nuclear than nuclear, since it is a new technology and it is clear, being that it produces only steam compared to the old coal-powered stations which produced smoke, not clear. These alchemical furnaces have served humanity well for a long time, though they have been aggressively demonized and misrepresented in public programming, much like alchemy itself. The reality is there are thousands of reactors of various sizes operating away perfectly well, powering the modern world 24/7, and we don't even notice. Mass hysteria is one hell of a drug.